Greta Bergman always had everything money could buy. At 28 years old, she was a young woman of sophisticated beauty, with brown hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders and green eyes she had inherited from her mother. The only child of Victor and Helena Bergman, owners of a real estate empire, she grew up in mansions with impeccable gardens and attended the best private schools. On that autumn morning, Greta was having her coffee on the spacious veranda overlooking the gardens of the family mansion. In front of her was a stack of bridal magazines and a tablet with multiple tabs open for wedding decorations. She sighed, feeling a weight she couldn't explain. In just 6 months, she would be married to Bernard Wellington, heir to the largest fortune in the region. Bernard was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a calculated smile. At 32 years old, he already headed the international division of Wellington Industries, a multinational company with investments in energy and technology. He was polite, intelligent, and knew exactly what he wanted. "Miss Greta, your father is asking me to remind you of the meeting at 10 a.m. at the central office," said Marta, the housekeeper, interrupting her thoughts. "Thank you, Marta. I'm leaving now." Greta closed the magazines without actually having looked at any of them. There was no excitement, no butterflies in the stomach that her friends described when talking about their own weddings. There was only a sense of inevitability, as if she were watching her life happen from the outside. Driving her sleek convertible through the bustling streets of the metropolis, Greta remembered when, at 17, she announced to her family that she wanted to study veterinary medicine. "Dear, that is a hobby, not a career for someone of your position," her father had said, in that gentle yet firm tone that left no room for debate. "Business administration is the natural path. You are brilliant with numbers and have a knack for business." And so it was. Greta graduated with honours in business administration and took over the new ventures department at Bergman Enterprises. She was competent, respected, but never felt that passion for work that she saw in her father's eyes when he talked about a new project. In the meeting room, her father, Victor Bergman, was presenting the figures for the last quarter with enthusiasm. Beside him, her fiancé Bernard, who was also investing in this project, was jotting something down on his tablet, occasionally adding precise and technical comments. They were like two versions of the same person, one already at the peak of his career, the other following the same path. "Greta, dear, what do you think about expanding into the Asian market next year?" her father asked, bringing her back to the present moment. "I think it's prudent, Dad. The reports I analysed show a favourable receptivity to our business model there." Bernard smiled in approval, and Greta felt that familiar sensation of having given the right answer, of having pleased him. It was a feeling that had accompanied her since childhood, the relief of meeting expectations. After the meeting, Bernard invited her to lunch at an exclusive restaurant on the top floor of a skyscraper. "We need to finalise the guest list for the wedding this week," he said, checking his luxury watch. "My mother is eager to order the invitations." "Of course," Greta replied automatically. "We also need to confirm the menu with the chef." Bernard nodded, satisfied. "I spoke with my real estate agent yesterday. He found a perfect property for us near the country club. 3,000 square meters, private security, and just 20 minutes from the financial district. It seems ideal." "Yes, and it has enough space for a home office for each of us," he added before taking a sip of his red wine. At that moment, Greta realised that Bernard already had their entire life planned, every detail organised in his methodical and efficient mind, just like his marriage proposal, which happened almost by accident. They were at a charity gala when Richard, an old friend of her father, approached. "And when are you finally going to get married?" he asked, with that indiscretion that only long-time friends allow themselves. Bernard had looked at Greta, pondered for a few seconds, and replied, "What do you think about next spring?" Greta had smiled, thinking it was a joke between them. But the next day Bernard appeared with a velvet box containing a stunning diamond ring. "I brought your engagement ring since yesterday. I was caught by surprise. We need to start organising the wedding. I'll ask my assistant to start researching the details so you can choose between the options." And thus, without a true proposal, without a moment of romance or surprise, Greta became engaged to Bernard Wellington. At the end of that afternoon, after an exhausting day of meetings and decisions about the wedding, Greta sat on a bench in the garden of the Bergman mansion. Autumn painted the trees with golden and reddish hues, and the cold evening air began to settle, but she barely noticed, lost in her thoughts. "Is everything okay, my little Greta?" The gentle voice startled her. It was Johnny Patterson, the family's gardener for more than 30 years. At 68, with completely white hair and a face marked by time and sun, Johnny had known Greta since she crawled through the flower beds. "I'm fine, Uncle Johnny, thank you," she replied, trying to smile. Johnny, with the wisdom that only years can bring, sat down beside her. "Your eyes say otherwise, little one. I remember when you were a girl and tried to hide that you had broken one of your mother's vases. You had exactly that same worried look." Greta couldn't avoid a genuine smile this time. "Is it that obvious?" "For someone who watched you grow up, yes." Greta sighed deeply, and to her own surprise began to confide in the old gardener. She talked about how she felt living a life that others had planned for her, about her abandoned childhood dreams, and about the marriage proposal that felt more like a business transaction. "It's like I'm on a high-speed train, Uncle Johnny, watching the landscape go by but unable to choose the direction." Johnny listened attentively without interrupting. When Greta finished, he remained silent for a few moments, then got up and walked to a nearby flower bed. He returned with a yellow rose, Greta's favourite since she was a child. To her astonishment, the old gardener knelt down with some difficulty and extended the flower. "My beloved Greta, with this rose, your favourite, I come on bended knee to ask you, will you marry me?" Greta looked at him, completely confused, until Johnny let out a hearty laugh. "My dear Greta, this is how I proposed to my wife, and you deserved no less than this. If you are living a life guided by the expectations of others, perhaps it is time for an act of courage and to take the reins of your own life." He handed the rose to Greta and continued, "You know, my late Rose once told me that life is like this garden. You can follow a strict plan, with everything in its designated place, perfectly symmetrical and predictable. Or you can let some flowers grow where they want, create unexpected spaces, allow nature to also participate in the process. Both gardens are beautiful, but one is more alive than the other." While holding the yellow rose, something awakened inside Greta. A question arose in her mind, simple, yet one she had never asked herself. What do I really want? That very night, Greta drove to Bernard's penthouse apartment. He was in his home office reviewing some contracts. "Bernard, what is my favourite flower?" she asked, standing at the door. He looked up, visibly surprised by the unexpected question. "Greta, what kind of question is that? I don't know, daisies." "Yellow roses," she replied, sitting down in front of him. "They've always been yellow roses ever since I was 6. Bernard closed his laptop, realizing that something important was happening. "Bernard, have you ever wondered why we are getting married?" "Because we love each other and it makes sense. Our families are close, we have compatible goals, similar values. This feels more like a corporate merger than a wedding." The conversation that followed was long and painful. Greta talked about her feelings, about how she felt suffocated by expectations, about her forgotten dreams. Bernard initially tried to downplay her concerns, suggesting that it was just pre-wedding nerves. But as the conversation went on, even he had to acknowledge that there was something fundamentally wrong. "Are you breaking up with me?" he finally asked. "I'm choosing a different path, for myself. And you deserve someone who chooses to be with you out of love, not convenience or expectation." Upon returning home that night, Greta felt strangely light. The engagement ring was no longer on her finger, and for the first time in years, she could glimpse an open, unplanned future filled with possibilities. The next morning, Greta gathered the courage to talk to her parents. To her surprise, After the initial shock, her mother was the first to show understanding. "I always knew there was something restless in you, dear. Since you were little, you always questioned everything, always wanted to know the reason behind things." Her father, although disappointed, did not try to dissuade her as she had feared. "You have my stubbornness, Greta. Perhaps I've forgotten what it's like to be young and want to find your own way." In the weeks that followed, Greta made decisions that surprised everyone who knew her. She resigned from the family businesses, enrolled in a veterinary course, and began looking for properties in the countryside. She found a farm 2 hours from the city, a stone house surrounded by green fields, with a small lake and old stables. The moment she stepped onto the land, she knew she had found her place. "It's perfect," she said to the real estate agent, feeling a genuine excitement she hadn't experienced in a long time. 6 months after the night Johnny offered her the yellow rose, Greta was completely settled into her new life. The stone house had been renovated, maintaining its rustic charm but with modern comforts. In the stable, now restored, lived 2 rescued horses. A small herd of goats grazed in an adjacent field, and a chicken coop housed more than a dozen happy chickens. On a sunny spring morning, the gardener Johnny came to visit her. At 69 years old, he had recently retired, but continued to tend to small gardens to keep active. "This place suits you, little Greta," he said, observing the garden she had started to create, a bit wild, full of colourful flowers without a rigid pattern. "Thank you for helping me find courage, Uncle Johnny." The old gardener smiled, his eyes shining with wisdom. "You've always been brave, Greta. You just needed to remember that." They walked across the grounds, and Greta showed him the small veterinary office she was building in an extension of the house. She planned to open it soon, and after graduating, she would start treating animals from the region, fulfilling a dream she had cherished since childhood. "And that young man, Bernard, how is he?" asked Johnny. "All right. We became friends, surprisingly. He is dating the new chief financial officer of the Wellington companies. A brilliant and ambitious woman, perfect for him." When they reached the field of wildflowers that Greta had planted, Johnny saw a special bed of yellow roses. "To never forget that night and the lesson I learned," Greta explained, picking a perfect rose and handing it to her old friend. That afternoon, sitting on the porch of her country house, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and pink, Greta reflected on how her life had changed. The family money had certainly facilitated her transition, but the lesson she learned was universal. We cannot live our lives based on the expectations of others. Her hands now had calluses from daily work, her face had gained freckles from the sun, and her wardrobe consisted mainly of jeans and comfortable t-shirts. But her green eyes shone with an authentic happiness they had never known before. A young goat approached, seeking attention, and Greta petted it affectionately. Tomorrow a new rescued horse would arrive, and she had plans to expand the veterinary clinic to help more animals in the region. Life was no longer a direct and predictable path in front of her. It was a wild garden, full of surprises and possibilities, just as she had always wanted it to be. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.